Thanks for joining us today for Data Analytics 102, the future of data analytics and how to prepare for it. So I'm Elliot Masuda, the Strategic Partnerships Manager, and I am here with our VP of Product and Engineering, Shri, and our Integration Manager, Megan, if they want to just quickly introduce themselves and say a few words.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. Again, as Elliot mentioned, VP of Product and Engineering. I've been with Foothold for the past 2 years. I can't believe it's been 2 years. It's been really fun 2 years. A whole bunch of good people and a mission that drives all of us together. So it's been super impressive working here. Prior to that, I had my own wearable technology startup that was dealing with machine learning and wearable technology for the beverage distribution space. I'll pass it on to Megan.
Thanks, Shri.
Yeah.
My name's Megan. I am the manager of integration. So I am tasked with getting our customers to make the most out of their third-party tools. I've been with Foothold in varying different roles for over 6 years now. And prior to that, I actually come from the provider, the services space. I worked with individuals with disabilities for well over 10 years. Thanks for joining us today and hearing what we have to say about data.
Yeah, so we're wanting to start just by recapping our Data Analytics 101, where we focused on guiding principles around data analysis, like data-driven culture, as well as components a provider would need for data analytics. So we touched on building your analytics stack, the need for infrastructure, as well as data, common data terminology. So in today's session in Data Analytics 102, we're going to continue that conversation and start by talking about current and future trends, and then we're going to go and talk about what agencies can do to prepare. So kicking off, industry trends and challenges. Megan, if you want to kick us off here.
Yeah, so I think that, what we're seeing in terms of need or challenge is the ability to have some outcome driven value-based care results and integrated whole person care. So it's about being able to justify the services that you're providing and making that piece easy, because it is very complex, especially across multiple different services. So being able to actually get that outcome data quickly is a challenge that some organizations have, and absolutely where we see this going more so. Then integrated whole person care, I think, ties very, very closely with health equity when we're talking about, general social determinants of health. So there's a need to be able to view a whole person, if you will. So not just economic status, educational status, community resources, but all of that tying together. And sometimes that information is siloed. That's going to be something we will absolutely need to solve for, if not, it's already the need. And because of that, because we're looking at different pieces of information, sometimes it happens in different systems. So the next 2 bullets about interoperability and using many different tools, there is a need, and there's going to be a greater need in the future to be able to not necessarily consolidate the information, but put it together in a place where you can access the full picture from all of these various pieces of information. So those are the trends, or those are like kind of the needs problems that we have now, and it's just going to compound more so as the time goes on.
Yeah, and that's great, Megan. And I think just one other thing that I know on the that I hear with a lot of our disability providers is kind of not that standardized outcome across a federal standard. We're actually on the mental health substance use side. We have some of those HEDIS measures and some of those quality outcome measures. So I think the disability sector is advocating or looking for those kind of standardized outcome measures to help with that. So, so moving on, we're going to start talking about, and Shri's going to tell us about data analytics and kind of more on the technology trends within the industry.
Thanks, Elliot. Yeah, I'll try not to make this too techy, but it is techy. Fair warning. I think if you participated in 101, you heard things related to Snowflake and data platforms in the cloud. I think even though these are, things of the past, so to say, these are really crucial things that happened over the past 20 years. Having cheaper computation is a big trend that drove all of this, like having almost tenfold increase every 4 years in compute power for the same dollar amount. That's a big deal. Virtualization technologies increased, really improved, led to cloud computing. And what we have today is a simple, scalable, secure cloud data platforms out in the market. That's what enables a lot of this simplicity, having those kinds of tools. I think we are going to continue to refine those over time. But what we've got today helps us takes all these silos that Megan talked about, these silos of information, getting it all together in one place and make sense out of it. Finally, that's what it boils down to, right? Like, you have busy lives caring for individuals. You want this to just working with a partner. I think this is what's doable now. I mean, I can't stress this enough. If you didn't take anything else out of this slide, this is something, the first bullet point is something that really drives Foothold today and gives us the ability to serve for our customers, in effective ways. That's what I'm super passionate about, what we have today. The second point, modern data and analytics and interoperability. It's a thing that Megan talked about, right? The whole aspect of, again, whole person care and interoperability. This is a thing that, you've heard about FHIR. Data analytics and interoperability are coming together. Great data platforms, cloud data platforms, are enabling interoperability between systems. There is obviously modern standards that are out there, including FHIR, but data analytics is playing a key role in that these days. That's a trend that is in its nascent stages, and Foothold is at the forefront of looking into that and actually actively working on it. You
Hey,
heard?
Shri, can I pause real quick?
Yeah.
Can you actually just kind of, if you can sum up? I know FHIR is a very common, but can you just kind of share, because I think some of the audience actually might not be familiar with FHIR. So if you could just share what your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So I think, with regards to, as a standard, it is a standard for modern interoperability that stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, that is developed by the standards body, which is called HL7. It's a standards body that has been that has been over time, over decades, been developing legacy, interoperability standards, finally, like CCDAs and other things, CCDs, that help us exchange data between different entities in a healthcare system, in a healthcare system. So again, one of the recent ones, or one of the more modern ones that they've created, that leverages modern web APIs, so to say, to communicate this data instead of exchanging data in flat files, enabling more real-time communication, is called FHIR. So FHIR stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources, and again, a very much of an API-based platform. So hopefully that helps. I don't want to it gets technical really quickly, but again, what I'm excited about that, again, this can get into an interoperability kind of presentation. I think that thing that it enables is openness, especially with FHIR comes some non-proprietary open app marketplaces for, like Smart on FHIR, right? Like things like that enable technologists like us, other vendors, like to all create applications for individuals, members, patient-focused apps, member-focused apps, while connecting that with the EHRs in an open, exchangeable data format. So again, I don't want to. Does that give enough?
Yeah, that's
clarity,
great.
Elliot? Okay.
Yeah,
All
thanks.
right. All right. So that's a good question. Again, it gives you the connection between data and interoperability, how these are all related. Again, data driven and data informed. And again, I just want to, even though I'm a technologist, I hate it when buzzwords get thrown around and don't give you. So you are going to notice you've already seen data driven. I mean, you probably, some of the slide deck also has a lot of data driven stuff, and probably our Cliff Notes. But I think one of the key things as organizations mature, you heard about data culture in the last presentation, right? Like the 101. Initially, it is really important for you to focus on and embrace being data driven, using data to guide or drive your decision making process. It's really important for you to do that first. But at some point, you have to, again, this already, you have to use data as one of the key factors and not let data alone drive all of the decision making. I know it's kind of it's kind of this chicken and egg thing, but honestly, what data is really good at is telling you tactical changes that you should do. You shouldn't, but at the same time, you shouldn't lose the forest for the trees, so to say. Really, your SME, your subject matter expertise, is crucial to use that with data in guiding the end result. So when you're talking about complex changes, it is really important where data is used as a guide, as another check in the box to help your decision making within your organization. Now, machine learning, and I know I haven't talked about all this yet, and you guys know a lot probably already about this. Machine learning and possibly the broader set of artificial intelligence is going to help with this in some way, where you're going to get help even with the bigger picture too, and it's already happening. But that said, data informed decision making is one where you use your subject matter expertise and use data along with it to finally drive the decision making, instead of data alone doing everything, right? Like some organizations are doing this. If they see a chart and it says something, they do it. And we don't want that. And the trend is more toward data informed decision making. So I'll pause. Elliot, any questions, or Megan?
No, I think that, I think in the industry in general, they kind of, to your point about a subject matter expert, I think what they have and have always had is that anecdotal data, right? The stories, the impacts that they see. And whether it's good, the funders now are wanting those anecdotal stories and also the data, right? To show how are they progressing? How are they getting more integrated into the community? How are they, improving their lives? And so to your point, that is exactly right.
So I have data fabric. Unfortunately, this is a technical term, and there's no getting around it. I won't be surprised if a lot of you haven't heard about this. This is a newer trend, more on the future side of things in terms of maturity. It's already happening, but it addresses, in my view, a very simple problem with our current solution set technologies. The fact on the matter is, about a recent study that was done by Forrester Research concluded that about 60 to 70% of the data gets unused in enterprise data systems. And now a lot of this is going to improve over time. A big factor there, this probably already, is getting the data ready for analysis, data analytics, right? Like even with partners like us, right? Like Foothold, that are experts in human services and technology. I think one of the key things that we are working on is building out highly scalable data platforms, like the first bullet point talks about. Now, it becomes really easy to pull the data from your EHR system ready for analysis and from other sources, like from the Rios, about incidents and things like that, other sources, to get a fuller picture about the member or your operational analytics versus whole person care, outcomes driven analytics. The key thing though is it still requires work. You need to take the data and prep it for analysis. Now, what data fabric at a high level? It is an architecture. Data fabric, what is it? It is an architecture that enables data to be used in place. Not to leave the transactional system. Where possible, it may leave it, but the whole goal of the data fabric is that using that architecture and a set of tools like machine learning tools and other tools related to ingesting data, it makes data accessible completely. And again, that's the end goal with this. If you make the entire set of data accessible for analysis for end users, again, you get more data points to explore the data with and figure out what root causes there are for adverse incidents or positive events, right? So finally, again, data fabric as a technology will play a key role in the future. Trustworthy artificial intelligence. I know a big part of this is related to equity, lack of bias. It's a big deal. If you all have been reading the news about this, right? Especially big players in the market, they're struggling with this, but they have figured out a way to enforce some guiding principles around artificial intelligence. For simple things like, hey, if the machine is making some conclusions, I need to be able to tell how it made that decision, right? It's no longer a black box. Explainability is a big thing. If you are able to figure out what this machine did and why it did it, then you can set up some ground rules for equity and bias and fairness, that kind of thing, so that you can actually track what it's doing and why it's doing it. I'll just say it, and it's a big thing in the field. I think it is a discipline that has a lot of relevance to our industry, and it's going to become more and more prominent. Finally, quantum computing. I think in the realm of power, do we have enough power? Yeah, we always feel like we could use more power, right? It's never. I think the reason it's going to be more and more important for us to find alternative sources of computing, like quantum computing, is because the number of sources of data is increasing, right? You guys know this. We are all using variables. The number of sources of data in general, with regards to where member data is, in order to serve them well, is increasing. And in order to actually, at a reasonable speed, compute all of this, again, it is necessary to continuously increase the computing power. Quantum computing is a key area where there is a lot of progress that's happening, because the growth curve in terms of computing power is kind of saturating. We are not, doing 10x increases as we used to, and we need that. Next slide. Sorry. So I know that was a lot, but those are key things that I wanted to share related to technologies.
Yeah, and now you're going to touch on how kind of those
I know,
out now, and how that is applicable in the world.
It's exciting stuff. I mean, we could talk all day about this. So I think the key thing is, as you would imagine, this is when we're taking a step back, data analytics is what this webinar is about. But as you saw in the previous slide, there's a suite of technologies that go hand in hand. That's what I want you to get. Data analytics, being able to capture and store the data from multiple sources in a scalable way and actually use it, either by a human or by the machine to garner intelligence and insights, is what this slide about, right? Again, how can these technologies help? Data analytics, machine learning, especially those kinds of technologies. I think it can help. There's already great stories that's happening on the field related to how this can help the individual as well as the organization serving the individual, you all. So again, from y'all's perspective, what's already happening and what Foothold is focusing a lot on making things simple is automating mundane tasks. You all know this. There's very few of you out there and a lot of individuals to serve. Like caseloads are obviously increasing. Again, focusing your time on caring for them, but at the same time reducing wait time. There are opportunities for automating mundane tasks like scheduling, documentation, and follow-up that these kinds of technologies enable. Another place where this is becoming front and center related to the EHR becoming insightful is really taking data analytics and to use that along with possibly some predictive analytics with or without machine learning to identify high risk members. Like what are the kind of profiles of individuals that are high risk based on some of the things that Elliot talked about on the behavioral health space, maybe more things, to actually identify them, tailor a good plan for them, a care plan, a service plan for them, and then react and see how we did. Actually data analytics plays a key role in to call to action what the outcome was. Hopefully these are positive ones, but it will show you whether you were headed in the right direction. Guess what? You can always make adjustments if you know where you were, right? Based on the kind of the plan you chose. That's where it plays a great part in assisting you. There are other ways that it can help with. These are key areas where it can help. There are multitude of areas that has been in place with regards to serving the individual. Again, another area, with regards to the organizations themselves I just quoted an example called the Trevor Project. Check it out. Again, it's a cool thing that this project out in California, especially use AI specifically with Google, their tool set to develop a bot to simulate, again, to help with crisis counseling training. Something that's it's super cool, and again helps the individual as well as the organization. Chatbots, again, as virtual companions, are a big deal in especially in the last 2 years. It's a current trend. I mean, it's in the last 2 years, organizations have deployed this. Human services organizations have deployed this to help reduce adverse events from depression, anxiety, and such. And I'll stop. I know I said a lot, but these are cool things that are happening, and I really feel proud about working with Megan and Elliot and others to make these kinds of dramatic changes and meaningful changes within Foothold to help you all and the broader community.
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of the common things that we're even trying to do is like member engagement tools, right? Just even other ways to engage with individuals that aren't leveraging, that are able to leverage technology, right? Like even sending a text to seeing somehow someone is doing, because they're not able to necessarily be connect face to face that day or in a week. So these are amazing things to come, but I think we're trying, even just on a day-to-day basis, trying to integrate technology. So that's.
And if I can just kind of compound something that Shri said in terms of the industry, the organization, is that the caseloads are large, right? There's only so many support employees there, and we can talk about employment as another trend and problem that we're trying to solve for, but I don't see that going away. So as much as we can leverage technology to take some of the burden, some of the burnout off of the people providing the service, the better, or the quicker we can answer some of these problems, and the less time people have to, match papers from 3 different file cabinets. That's where we're saving employee time, employee frustration, and being able to provide more to the individuals that are being supported. And I think that's kind of crucial in all of this too.
Yeah, and a good segue to our next slide. So how can Foothold help, and what role do we kind of play in this ecosystem?
So we like to believe that we are human-centered, intelligent, insightful EHR. So as Shri pointed out, ultimately we want to be able to give you those insights about an individual, about your organization, without having to wait for the data to come together. So quick, easy, insightful. And we're data partners. So this is really, definitely more than a two-prong approach, but I do want to point out that the two prongs that are in play on this call right now is very evident. Customer success, right? You have somebody from my team engaging the customer, finding out what the needs are, understanding what we're trying to solve for, looking for industry trends, looking for value-based payment rules. And that's what our passion is. We also have Shri and Shri's team, and as you heard from the previous slides, how passionate Shri is in the tech trends. Marrying those two pieces together really kind of it makes us successful in terms of data and data as a solution and the value in your data.
Awesome. So how can agencies prepare? So this, Megan, is going to continue.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna we're gonna dive into each one of these circles in the slides to come, but really just thinking about being outcome driven, not being scared of data, the word data, the buzzwords, ensuring you have data quality, and working with a data partner. So Elliot, if we can get into those slides to kind of like flesh out some of what all of this means. Great. So don't be scared of your data. So the term data analytics, business intelligence, visualization, they can be intimidating. When we think of, or let me throw myself under the bus here, when I think of human services and the work that I came from, I don't necessarily think of data analytics. I hear that, I think computer scientist, but really it's already ingrained in everything that we do. We tend to just not call it data. It's just something that's kind of in our day-to-day operation. So the first thing that you need to do is forget the word data and all of maybe the scary connotations that it has around it, the technical connotations. And really it's about knowing your story, knowing what pieces of information you need to tell your story, to support your story, to validate your story. And then ensuring that there are no barriers to get that information. Barriers may be just, where does somebody go to enter that information? Is it easy to extract out of your system, or is it easy to marry with other pieces of information that you need to collect? That's step one. And again, that's some of the stuff that most organizations are already doing. They know the stories. It might just not be easy to tell them at this point. So step one, you're already doing. Let's just make sure you cover those three key pieces.
And Megan, I'm just going to pause real quick, and if just to let the participants again know that if you have any questions, please feel free to engage with us in the chat, either to all the hosts and panelists or just to Foothold Technology, and we'll incorporate those in the presentation. Next slide.
So data quality, keeping it consistent, and routinely auditing your data. There's a little bit more at play here than just consistency and auditing. Like I mentioned on the last slide, you don't want to have barriers. Our employees are already stretched thin. We don't need to make the burden of data entry any more difficult for them. So where possible, cut down any barriers. If you can, structure your data, maybe using medical coding instead of free text. So, being able to type in an ICD-10 code that relates with the diagnosis using some kind of medical coding tool is one way to remove barriers, make the data entry easier, and also keeping it consistent across the board. And it doesn't have to just be medical coding. Where you can in your system, streamline a workflow. Instead of just having open text boxes where the employees stare at a screen saying, what do I type here? Give them specific questions to answer. And by doing that, giving specific questions with specific response options is also keeping the data consistent. And then audit what you're capturing. Where are you seeing, Shree's gonna like my buzzword here, where are you seeing null values? Where are you seeing blank data? You know, is it because the question that you're asking is hard to answer? Or is it in a place that's not easily accessible? Why is it being missed? So keeping it consistent, auditing it, crucial to your end result. A thing that I hear often in communications that I have is garbage in, garbage out. So if you've heard that term, it's very, very, in play in this conversation. If you're asking employees to just type and you're getting garbage in the reports, you're not going to be able to kind of get that juicy information.
And Megan or Shree, can you kind of just define or talk about the difference between structured and unstructured data, and maybe some of the challenges that providers and we just face around unstructured data? I don't know who wants to take a stab at
Yeah,
that.
I think I'll address the former, and Megan, you should take the latter part of that question, clearly. So I think, no, it's a great question, right? Like, I think one, in terms of definition, really structured data is something that has some definition to it. Some really, in terms of what kind of, codifying what kind of data it is. Is it a number or a string, or, and how long it could be, and what are the permissible values. The more we know about it in terms of what kind of information can go into that particular field in terms of length and type. Those kinds of things help us validate it to make sure it is adhering to the rules of the game for that particular element. So structured structured data is that. Unstructured data, is really the other extreme, where you don't have any kind of system in place to really encapsulate how long or what kind of type of data can go into it. So really very loose in its rules. We have no schema for that particular type of information. And there is semi-structured that's in between as well, which has, again, as you would imagine, there are some ground rules related to, you can ascertain some elements of information that you can say that, there is some length to it, with regard to if that particular data, free-form data, has it precedes itself with some prefix and a suffix. There are some things that you can garner from that particular field. So that gets into semi-structured data. With regards to the latter part of the question, again, Megan, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think that, again, where possible, we want to guide for the information we're looking for. Across human services, employees may vary in educational level, as well as even English as a second language issue. Being able to cut down the unknown, the better. So if we're creating, and very generally speaking, if we are creating a field in our EHR and we want, for example, an entitlement, a Medicaid entitlement number, having some rules in place, as Shree said, to not take, an exclamation point or a $ will help keep the data, keep the data integrity. Additionally, we also want to make sure as an organization we are getting the information we want. So if you're having some kind of encounter or working with an individual and you want to make sure that your employee is capturing how did they present, were they alert, were they dressed appropriately for the weather, asking those questions and not just relying on an open text box helps so much. Not just make sure you have everything you need, but also kind of the anxiety of someone just looking at a blank piece of paper. So we're almost, in fact, writing the story, just looking for the answers. So that is important, the guiding the information you need.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So moving on to data partners.
Data partners. And I think we've kind of touched on this in a few slides already, but what you're looking for in a data partner is someone who believes in the power of your data, someone who understands that you have a story to tell with your data, even though you may not call it data analytics. They want to make sure the information you're putting in is accessible to you. And also, as Shri pointed out, understands the future trends and what you may need to do with your data, both in the tech environment as well as your industry, where your service organization might have to go with the information you're collecting. The truth is, as your employees are collecting this information, it becomes valuable to you, to your funders, perhaps to Medicaid to support the services that you're providing or the money that you are getting based on the services you're providing. It's, as you're entering it into the system, it should be there to back you up or to help guide your decisions. So when you're looking for a data partner, you're looking for someone who values the work that you're doing and the effort and work you're putting into collecting that data, and is willing to guide you through the process of telling your story, whatever story or stories that may be.
Yeah, awesome. And just kind of also talking about, I know we have talked about kind of the components that we have to help people free their data. Is there any questions I think that you're asking? I think one thing that we run into a lot is state systems, right? Like they're relatively, I don't want to say antiquated. And so it's hard to get systems out of, or get data out of their system, get data kind of into their system. So we don't, that's something, I guess it's, what are we looking for when we're looking for systems? If they were going to like advocate to the state of like, we want a system to, is it interoperability, but are there questions to kind of know if an entity is prioritizing data, if you will, if that makes sense?
I'm definitely going to kick this off to Shri, because I think that the tech piece, asking the technical questions are important. But I think, what access to my data do I have, and what format does it come in? Is it automated versus is this manual? Those are just some of the questions you might want to ask up front as you're talking about looking at different, organizational data partners.
Yeah, I mean, this one is very nuanced, right? Like at a very high level, I think if I were an organization, trying to select a data partner, that has specifically these kinds of, state systems in mind, I think definitely I would want my data partner to be very knowledgeable about all the good, bad, and ugly about these state systems, as you pointed out, right? Like experience in that is crucial, because these, and also these open formats that we talked about, FHIR, for example, that I talked about, it's up and coming. I mean, by the time those kinds of open formats are adopted, it'll take time for it to penetrate and through the overall, healthcare system network. so it's important for the data partner from that angle to be proficient in key modern interoperability standards and be ahead of the game while having had experience with legacy data interoperability issues, while being aware about the regulatory challenges that and that these state systems come with. I think at a very high level, I think knowing what we do dealing with these state systems, legacy and modern, right? Like, I think the fact that we have internal knowledge within our CX and sales and marketing teams about these state systems helps us actually build really nimble APIs, right? Like, we are able to have different versions of our APIs internally, ranging from things that do flat file exchanges. Very simple, sounds very legacy, but it is something that is a fact on the ground. It works most of the cases when dealing with these state systems. So at a very high level, expertise and internal knowledge of how these state systems work and how those states themselves work in terms of how these standards are set up in the first place. Non-technical knowledge is huge. And then having a very nimble provider, data partner, that has both experience in the old as well as investing in the new. That's what I would say at a very high level. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Elliot. So.
Well, I think it's just I think more and more as people either are advocating for whether it's service provision, like technology is becoming more and more integral and kind of critical to organizations. And I think in a lot of whether it's a redesign or kind of advocating towards regulation, they mention technology and infrastructure, but then I don't know if they know what they're looking for, right? It's like it's all this, and it was moving first to kind of documenting those, and now it's like standardizing outcomes, and eventually it's like it's interoperability, but what does that mean and all of those things. So just wanted to kind of get both of your thoughts on that, which was great. So moving along, understanding the output.
So I think at this point, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen and we'll take a look at our demo database data, our BI dashboards, if you will, specifically around our referrals data and our incidents data. Because again, if we're looking at perhaps trends, both organizationally and maybe with a member, a client, a consumer, those are probably two key or two great examples to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and oh yes, I can stop your screen share and steal it. Great. So again, please don't, this is all, demo data. This is all fake stuff. So the story may not always make sense because people put, garbage into our demo database. But right now I'm looking at a referral dashboard, and these are referrals across all of the programs in my database. And at a very, very high level, I can see my number of admissions versus the number of referrals. So how many referrals did we get versus how many individuals actually got admitted into some programs, and the average amount of time it took to get that client admitted. When you're working with your data in a very, modern tool, you can do things in real time, such as drag data across. So I want to see what's been true from Q1 2018 till present. Being able to just capture a piece of information and have the rest of my data update is giving me quick insights. So I see that just in that time period, my average days to admission went from 78 and change to 25.32 days. So what is that telling us? Did we improve our admission processes from 2008? Should we continue with our trend? It doesn't look like we see huge dips. Clearing this selection, we can go and maybe tell a different story, maybe not about the time frame, but maybe we want to, pinpoint a particular program. It looks like our awards demo is a big referral source. We're getting lots of referrals here, 1066. That referral source, well, it's taking some time to admit a client. Even though we're getting more, the length or the time it takes to get that client to admission, less than our average, but still 68.23, that might not be ideal compared to when we, again, just quickly tell a different story in real time. This ABC agency as the referral source, well, their average to admission is let's say 2 days. So here we can start kind of seeing the difference between these referral agencies. Are they referring people with to different programs, or maybe even by gender? Where are the trends that I can point out and act in real time to bring my average length from 78 and change down to something a little bit more reasonable? So being able to compare by program, by time frame, by perhaps even gender, ethnicity, really allows you to start acting in the moment, either validating what you already knew was true because you have the data to support it, or kind of revisit what you're doing, or tweak things to see what works better. That's just that's organizationally, right? Big picture across all of your programs based on referral sources. Why are people being rejected? Where are they coming from? Again, really beneficial and valuable to be able to act in real time and not wait months to get that data back.
Yeah, Megan, if I could chime in real quick.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is a kind of as I'm, looking at you explore this dashboard, right? One of the things you were doing were, figuring out, data makes you inquisitive, right? You want to know more about why it's happening, positive or negative. I mean, I think that's the cool part about these exploratory tools these days. And given the responsiveness is much better compared to in the past, it just keeps improving. It makes you ask more and more questions, right? And one of the things that, again, in the future, these are things that are, in process, where these kinds of anomalies, like there's this detection, exploration, you're looking for things that added up, patterns that added up to create a positive, really positive outcome, or patterns that, caused or, really that caused a really negative outcome. You were hunting down, for example, like possibly, I think, which referral source caused the least number of average days, or which referral source had the most. And again, it cannot, some of it can be cumulative, right, as well. It's not one factor, can, multiple factors combined together resulted in one outcome. So I think you were doing, I mean, a lot of these BI tools, that's what you do these days, right? Like, I think it's great that it does it. But in the future, and again, some of the things like, again, some level of machine learning and predictive analytics, where it gets into is anomaly detection. Anomaly can be a good thing or a bad thing, where it actually tells you, you don't even need to come in front of it. It actually gets you an email or a chat message saying, okay, based on, over the last year, you obviously want to, tell the machine what time frame you're looking at, assuming you want anomalies in the last quarter or something. It can actually tell you, if the referral source was, I don't know, Trading Spaces or Awards Demo, combined with, their other aspects of the referral source, the referral itself, then, the average number of days were high. The actual anomaly, again, it would take you some time for you to figure that out if it is extremely complex data set. So those are some of the things that obviously it can actually find an anomaly. The next step up is actually telling you what would happen if a new kind of data came into place if you didn't do anything, right? Like, this is, again, predictive analytics, which gets into, the future stuff. Again, instead of you spending a lot of time in front of your dashboard, you're focused on again, productive work where you're seeing anomalies or possible results if you didn't change anything. So again, sorry, this was a good moment.
No, I think that's very, very important to point out, because again, this is waiting for the data to happen as opposed to being ahead of it, right? Ultimately, Shri, we want to be ahead of the anomalies, or when an anomaly happens, not waiting for me to go look for it, but say, hey, something's up, act now. So much more engaging and less time with me having to search things down as the user, for sure. I'm going to quickly just bring up the incidents dashboard, where, because again, this might be a little bit more client, member, consumer focused when we're looking at trends and incidents. For example, is my client Megan participating in many fights, or has there been a lot of accidental injuries? One of the things that a lot of BI tools will allow you to do is set up pulse alerts. So if my number of incidents goes above a certain threshold, maybe the threshold at your organization is 5, all of a sudden overnight you have 18 incidents, without even the machine learning piece, you can set those thresholds to get alerts. So really you're acting faster, your response time is faster, and looking and identifying trends is faster. So in my experience, being able to, look at things like missing client, 8% of my incidents had to do with missing clients. Scrolling down, well, which programs are they occurring in? They're occurring in my Act Services Team 1 mostly. And who's the biggest culprit? That's, as the reporter or as the employee, who's the biggest culprit that may be not paying attention in program? Well, unfortunately, in this example, that would be me. But again, what trends are you seeing, and how quickly can you act? In this case, could potentially save lives, and not have to, again, extract, wait for this information to come to your desk. So we are talking big picture, looking at multiple systems and pulling data together to meet your most advantageous data needs. But we're also talking about things, like I said earlier, that you are trying to do every day, that perhaps there are barriers. Maybe you're not getting the data, you're not getting the alerts, it's taking time to get this information, where it can just be a few clicks of a button. And I think ultimately understanding the breadth of what data can do for your organization is important. But what are your immediate needs? What are your long-term goals? So that's what's going to, set you up to be successful in your data story and journey.
Awesome. I'm going to just share my screen again, really to open it up for Q&A. We are basically 5 minutes to the end, and at this time, Megan and Shri, if we see if there's any questions, if there's any final thoughts, or anything else that you want to just say in the wrap up.
To be honest, I think I just want to kind of hammer home the fact that these stories are things that most organizations are doing anyway. They know their story. It's just hard sometimes telling the story. So it could be something simple like, I need to know how many males with autism are participating in X program with X funding so I can apply for a grant. Having the data at hand that's easy to work with is going to be able to help you tell your story.
Yeah. No, I think well said. I don't, we've talked about a lot of this before. Again, just summarizing it, key thoughts. I'm all about simplicity, right? Like, I think, the key thing that Megan talked about is don't be scared about data, because that's the psychology is everything, right? Like you want to try this. And I think the fact on the ground, hopefully you took away from this presentation, if not beforehand, if you already, most of you may know this already, is, for you to be thriving, you need your subject matter expertise, your staff, your amazing staff, your mission, along with a data partner and data to impact it, right? And I think we are here to help, right? We have, I'm proud about, being here with Megan and Elliot and the rest of the Foothold technology team. There are amazing things happening where the complexity of our space is simplified, with us working together. And I think that's the main thing is, choose a right partner for your dance. And I think, we feel proud about, being one of the options out there. So yeah, that's all I can think.
Awesome. And so we do have one question or a couple questions. I'm going to quickly answer the first one about PowerPoint or later viewing. Yes, we'll be having this. We'll share the PowerPoint and the recording with you all in the weeks to come. And then the other, I think we have time for this question real quick. So what are some of your best tips for consolidating and or connecting all of an organization's databases? Our organization has a lot of databases, and we're doing a lot of this work right now. So I will share, Shri or Megan want to answer that.
Shri, do you want to speak to it first? I have thoughts too to probably to
go for it.
up.
I will probably be talking about the technology piece, right? But go for it. Yeah.
So
yeah,
the first thing I would suggest, as again, previously being in implementation, is recognize that there's never going to be one solution. You're never going to have something that does your employee payroll, your fleet management, if you do that, and a client chart all in one. I mean, you're not going to find that. But what you want to do in terms of consolidating is find out where the duplicate data entry is happening and why it's happening. So again, if you are typing in a client's name, date of birth, social, Medicaid number, diagnosis in 4 different databases, yeah, it's probably time to look at the consolidating of that. So I think part is, setting realistic expectations, knowing that anything that you're using to manage your vans is probably going to be different than what you're using to support individuals or document a client's chart. But where there's a massive overlap, reconsider and perhaps, go to market and look for another tool that does kind of marry those needs together.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing I'll add is I think one of the things we do, and one of the reasons we've chosen to go down a path of having an amazing, scalable, highly, amazingly scalable and secure data warehousing platform that we support is to really tie it all together. And that's kind of what, I think probably, Elliot, you were referring to as well, is, this is kind of, I think as Megan put it, you're going to have some overlap. You're going to have different tools that do, their own thing in the best possible way. So, obviously reduce the overlap where possible. But then finally, I think when you're trying to consolidate things, when you say, aggregate thing, there is this notion of gaining intelligence from all these disparate data sources. I think that's where a data warehouse comes into play. And, you heard a lot about that in the prior webinar, hopefully. But yeah, again, think about it is as one data platform, one place where all of this information from these disparate sources comes in and lives, where you can make intelligence or garner intelligence from this one place. I also talked about this data fabric earlier, which is going to, at some point in the future, keep that data in its respective sources and for you to analyze across the board without even pulling information together. But this is kind of work that we are doing today, working closely with, large and different size organizations to kind of make sense from disparate data sources. So yeah.
Awesome. I just want to thank everyone for attending, and really kudos. Thank you, Shri and Megan, for your expertise and knowledge. This was an awesome webinar.